President Donald Trump withdraws U.S. from 66 international organizations, a major foreign policy shift shaping global cooperation in 2026. Title: Why the U.S. just pulled out of 66 international organizations. Explained. In a watershed moment for American foreign policy, President Donald J. Trump has announced that the United States will withdraw from 66 international organizations, treaty bodies, and conventions, a move that marks one of the most dramatic shifts away from global multilateral cooperation in recent history. AP News. This decision, formalized on January 7, 2026, comes via a presidential memorandum directing all executive departments and agencies to cease U.S. participation and funding in these organizations, which the administration says no longer serve American interests. The White House. Let's unpack what this means, why it's happening, and what the global implications could be. What exactly did the U.S. withdraw from? The Trump administration's memo targets a broad list of entities, covering 66 organizations divided roughly into two groups. 31 United Nations affiliated bodies, including specialized agencies, treaty frameworks, and advisory panels. 35 non-UN, multilateral, or specialized international organizations that operate globally on issues like climate, trade, science, and security. The White House. Withdrawal from a United Nations entity typically means U.S. participation ends and all associated funding stops, to the extent permitted by U.S. law. The same applies to non-UN bodies. The White House. Examples of organizations affected. Some of the most notable entities include UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, the foundational international treaty for climate negotiations and the legal basis for agreements like the Paris Climate Accord. In Cyprus, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, the world's leading scientific body assessing climate change. In Cyprus, UN Population Fund, UNFPA, a major global agency providing reproductive and health services worldwide. International Solar Alliance, ISA, a climate-focused partnership led by India and France. Business Today, the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, the Global Counterterrorism Forum, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, among many others. Brussels Signal. The mix includes climate, environmental, health, and governance organizations, as well as specialized technical bodies that oversee international cooperation in areas like mining, technology, education, cyber expertise, and more. Reddit. Why this is happening. The America First rationale. They advance agendas that conflict with U.S. sovereignty or economic priorities. They waste taxpayer money without delivering meaningful benefits to the American people. The White House. In the words of Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the administration views many of these bodies as anti-American, useless, or wasteful, accusing them of pushing ideologies around climate policy, gender equity, and global governance that Washington sees as contrary to U.S. interests. Brussels Signal. This move is also tied to an earlier review ordered in 2025, Executive Order 14199, which tasked the State Department with evaluating all international organizations where the U.S. had membership or provided funding. The White House. A break from decades of U.S. foreign policy norms. Traditionally, the United States has been one of the largest funders and most influential members of the United Nations system and other multilateral organizations, shaping global rules on health, labor, safety, trade, and climate. The post-World War II international order itself grew out of U.S. leadership in establishing the United Nations and Bretton Woods institutions like the World Bank and IMF. Pulling back from 66 global bodies at once represents a significant departure from decades of U.S. foreign policy, which often balanced national interests with a belief that collective action could address challenges that no single country could solve alone, such as climate change, global health threats, or humanitarian crises. The Washington Post. Global responses and criticism. The reaction from global leaders, experts, and civil society has been heated and critical. Climate scientists and environmental advocates. Climate professionals warn that the withdrawal from the UNFCCC and IPCC could severely weaken global efforts to combat climate change. Without U.S. involvement, from one of the world's largest economies and emitters, International climate negotiations and policy coordination may lose momentum and credibility. The Guardian. Diplomacy and human rights advocates. Critics argue that leaving organizations focused on peace-building, migration, and human rights could erode international cooperation and reduce the U.S. voice in critical global debates. The Washington Post. International reactions. Foreign governments have expressed concern that this move signals a retreat from multilateral responsibility. Some analysts even suggest it could contribute to a fragmentation of global governance, with other powers like China stepping in to fill the gaps left by U.S. disengagement. Global Times. Potential impacts. What could change? Climate action. Withdrawing from the UNFCCC and the IPCC, organizations central to global climate governance, could slow international efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adapt. Global Times. Potential impacts. What could change? Climate action. Withdrawing from the UNFCCC and the IPCC, organizations central to global climate governance, could slow international efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to climate impacts. This departure may weaken future climate deals or reduce U.S. involvement in setting global norms. In Cyprus. Global health coordination. Although the WHO withdrawal happened earlier, this latest move reinforces U.S. distancing from international health coordination. This may affect preparedness and response to future pandemics or global health threats, reducing Washington's role in global health policy. Diplomacy and security. Exiting peace-building and governance organizations could limit U.S. influence in conflict prevention and democratic development around the world, potentially giving more space to rival powers or destabilizing regions where the U.S. was traditionally active. Economic and scientific cooperation. Pulling out of specialized economic, scientific, and technical bodies could diminish U.S. access to collaborative research, data sharing, and standard-setting platforms, affecting everything from global trade norms to technology and resource management. What happens next? The implementation of these withdrawals will take time. Many international organizations have formal exit processes, meaning the U.S. will remain technically bound until those procedures are complete. Reuters. Meanwhile, the State Department is expected to continue reviewing other organizations under the 2025 executive order, meaning more potential exits could be on the table in the months ahead. The White House. Conclusion. A defining moment in global relations. President Trump's decision to withdraw the United States from 66 international organizations is more than just a foreign policy adjustment. It's a strategic reposition.